Thank you, Madam President, and good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today in the memory of the great Reverend Dr. Cecil Chip Murray, a fierce civil rights leader who for decades was an influential voice for South Los Angeles community in my district. Reverend Murray was the legendary prophetic pastor of First AME Methodist Episcopal Church of Los Angeles, better known as FAME Church, the city's oldest Black congregation, and a leading center for racial and economic justice movements. It was a place where many would gather to support one another in the times of challenge and also to celebrate our communities in times of victory. And while many will recall fame for the high-profile guests such as US presidents and governors coming to visit celebrities and athletes, for those of us who lived in South LA, it was just known as the place where Reverend Murray pastored and where real impact was made on the lives of the congregants and on the life of the community, particularly the West Adams neighborhood. Fame Church was founded in 1872 by Biddy Mason, and I think it's important to understand the significance of Pastor Murray by understanding the significance of this church. Biddy Mason was a former slave who walked by foot to travel behind her slave master and his caravan from Mississippi to the West in 1848. And after learning that California was free, Biddy Mason petitioned for her freedom, and she settled in Los Angeles, where she became a prominent landowner. She provided care services in her community, and ultimately a philanthropist and founder of the Great Fame Church. It's not a coincidence that this church and its rich history would be connected with such a great and phenomenal, loving leader as Pastor Murray. In 1977, Reverend Murray began his 27-year pastorship of Fame. He took the church of a few hundred members and grew it to a congregation of nearly 20,000 during his tenure, becoming the largest Black church, one of the largest Black churches in the country. And Pastor Murray did this with such a gentle spirit. He was such a kind man who eagerly welcomed all into his sanctuary. He often called them son and daughter, and I'm so honored to have been one of the ones that he called daughter as a young organizer, where he welcomed me into the congregation and talked about the links between Christianity and justice in our communities. He would envelop you in that warmth regardless of your age, your ethnicity, your race, and religion. And he would bring that beaming smile and charismatic presence as the real qualities of a trusted leader, a leader who was trusted with our community in the most difficult of times, in times of unrest. He was a go-to for so many of us. And at the height of the racial tension in Los Angeles after the brutal beating of Rodney King, it was Reverend Murray who really rose to national prominence as the unifier. He became a voice of peace and of activism and ensured that Los Angeles would overcome and be more united in the midst of the city's worst violence and uprising since the 1992 Watts Rebellion. 1965 Watts Rebellion. Before the release of the verdicts of the police officer's trial for the beating, Reverend Murray brought everyone into the church. He opened the doors of the church for that whole day and evening, and he warned from the pulpit that if you're going to burn something down, don't burn down the houses of the victims. Don't burn down the houses of your community. Burn down the legislature. Burn down the ballot box. Burn down the courtroom. Burn it all down by voting and getting involved, brother. And he called on members of the congregation, particularly the men in the congregation, to stand up and to go out into the community that evening to mentor others and to create peace on the streets to help residents heal from the civil unrest. When the rebuilding efforts began, Reverend Murray reached out to corporate donors and government agencies from across the country and raised millions of dollars to launch Fame Renaissance, which became an economic development engine for South Los Angeles along the West Adams corridor, an area that had been largely ignored. This church invested millions to rebuild, and Fame by itself created over 4,000 jobs, created 300 new homeowners, and helped to seed 500 new businesses in the wake of the unrest. The effects are still standing today and is a symbol of the resurgence of this corridor. Pastor Murray said the role of the church was to be a fueling station for social service agencies that could really help and heal the city long term. Committed to building a vibrant Black community throughout Los Angeles, Reverend Murray also emphasized the need to create future leaders. And once retired as pastor, he went on to serve as Tansey Professor of Christian Ethics and the chair of the Cecil Murray Center for Community Engagement at USC. There, he trained nearly 1,000 faith leaders in what we called, and he coined, the Murray Method. And the Murray Method was simply about being on the ground and involved in your community. What he talked about were the 5 M's, the mission of the church being felt in the community, the focus on the membership and building relationships with those in the congregation, and building membership in the community. Money, meaning that we need to invest in our institutions, and maintenance, meaning we needed to care, but most of all, morale, meaning that we continue to have the voice of justice inside of our congregations, building the morale of our church and our community. These were all key attributes that Pastor Murray taught so many other leaders across the community, not just to build churches, but to transform communities. Reverend Murray forever touched the lives of those who had the honor to work and worship alongside of him. And I am blessed, again, to say that I was a cadre of organizers, young Black organizers, that he would welcome into the church over a meal to have a conversation and to figure out ways that the church could support efforts like our Justice for Janitors movement in Los Angeles. He was one of the few pastors who stood with a largely immigrant workforce, undocumented workers, to say that they are part of Los Angeles and deserve justice. And after those workers were organized, he stood with the private security officers. These were largely Black men and women in those same buildings to say that they too deserved justice. And we hosted a number of teach-ins in the church, bringing hundreds of community members and workers to create the link between what it means to be godlike in the church, but also what it means to be godlike in our communities and in our work sites. I saw how Pastor Murray was a true moral authority that helped to lead and guide this great community of South LA from the pulpits and in our communities. And Reverend Murray was laid to rest this weekend, and the church was overflowing with guests who came over his passing, which was earlier in the month, to pay their respects and give their love to this amazing leader who led an extraordinary life and also made our lives touched by his mere presence. He is survived by his son, Drew Murray, and also by his niece, Tammy Murray, and his grandniece, April Cohee, and Reverend Mathis Murray, who are in the gallery with us today. And I think there they are. Thank you so much for being with us. And with that, I ask that we adjourn in his memory today.